Later, when the Academy archived the footage, they would label the file Incident Reg 7731. That label would be cited in courtrooms, training modules, and diplomatic briefings. But on the networks, on the feeds students whispered about and officials pretended not to watch, it earned a different name: the 6 seconds. 6 seconds where a human student, already injured, chose not to retreat. 6 seconds where Academy security doctrine failed. 6 seconds that forced the galaxy to confront a biological truth it had never needed to learn before. What the footage does not capture is the moment before the violence, when a human evaluated threat, authority, and survival, and reached the same conclusion our species always has when restraint is broken. That was the lesson no one intended to teach.
The Interstellar Academic Coalition liked to call Thathis Multi-Species Academy a sanctuary, a neutral ground, a place where intellect superseded instinct, where ancient grudges were reduced to citations and wars were studied instead of thought. From orbit, the Academy resembled a luminous crown encircling the gas giant Vetra 9th. Rings of habitation rotated at staggered speeds, each tuned to a different gravity preference. Transit corridors glowed with soft bioluminescence as shuttles threaded between them like slow-moving stars. Evan Calder watched it all through the shuttle viewport, his reflection faint against the glass. His hands were clenched around the straps of his pack, not out of fear, he told himself, but anticipation. He had grown up on a human agricultural colony with more soil than steel, where the tallest structure was a weather tower and the most complex traffic problem involved livestock. Thathis was something else entirely. Architecture grown rather than built, corridors that shifted subtly as load-bearing structures adapted in real time. The shuttle docked with a vibration that Evan felt through his boots. A synthesized voice spoke in 16 languages. "Welcome to Thathis Multi-Species Academy. Please observe local biological safety guidelines." Evan exhaled, squared his shoulders, and stood.
Humans were still new to the galactic academic ecosystem. 3 years of exchange students, 2 years of probationary enrollment, 1 year of full academic access, granted only after exhaustive review boards concluded that humans were not, in fact, walking biohazards. They were cataloged clinically: high endurance, moderate strength, low biological efficiency, elevated emotional variance under stress. Security briefings added a quieter addendum. Humans display disproportionate response to perceived personal threat. Exercise caution during enforcement interactions. Evan had read those bulletins. He understood them academically. What he did not yet understand was how quickly a reputation could turn into a trigger. Officer Grell Tharsk despised academy duty. The Brakari valued dominance displays, clear hierarchies, and immediate submission. Tethys demanded patience, layered consent protocols, and restraint verging on passivity. Grell possessed none of these traits in surplus. His prior postings had ended poorly: excessive force citations, behavioral reviews quietly marked concerning. Each transfer moved him further from prestige and closer to obscurity. Tethys had accepted him because the Academy needed bodies more than excellence, and because Grell knew how to look the other way. The registration concourse buzzed with overlapping languages, pheromonal signals, and data overlays. Evan moved cautiously, eyes flicking between his datapad and the physical space around him. He felt the impact before he understood it.
A massive, armored shoulder struck him from the side. The world lurched. Evan stumbled, boots scraping against polished flooring as he fought to stay upright. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, palms raised in the universal gesture of non-aggression. The Bracari turned. Grell Farsk looked down at him with unfiltered contempt. "You failed to yield," Grell said. Evan tried to explain, about unfamiliar signage, about congestion, but the words never found traction. Grell shoved him. The floor rose fast.
Supervisor Lysa Wren saw the spike the moment it happened. Her monitoring display flared, Bracari aggression markers climbing, human stress indicators following in lockstep. She issued a direct order. "Officer Tharsk, disengage. This is not an enforcement scenario." He ignored her. The strike came without warning. Knuckles met bone. Evan's vision flashed white, and something ancient, buried deep beneath language and law, woke up.
Adrenaline flooded Evan's bloodstream. Pain dulled, not gone, but distant, like a sound heard through water. Time fractured, moments stretched long enough to analyze, to choose. He stood without conscious command. When Grell swung again, Evan stepped into the blow. His hand closed around the Bracari's wrist. Strength surged, not clean, not efficient, but overwhelming. Ligaments protested, tendons strained. He held anyway.
Grell had restrained larger beings, stronger ones, species that folded once pain crossed familiar thresholds. Humans did not. Evan rotated his hips, using leverage rather than mass. His elbow drove upward. Armor cracked. Grell reached for his baton. That was the moment restraint ended.
Evan did not think in techniques. There was no catalog of lethal moves in his head, only angles, leverage, and the urgent necessity to stop the next strike. Grell's hand closed around the baton. Evan reacted on instinct, shaped by a lifetime of rough work, informal sparring, and a human nervous system screaming now. He stepped inside Grell's reach and wrapped an arm across the Bracari's upper chest and neck. Not a crush, not a wrench, but a clamp that pinned the shoulder girdle and pressed the soft tissues against rigid armor edges. His other hand anchored the forearm, turning Grell's own mass against him. This was not a spinal twist. It was a control hold executed under catastrophic stress. Grell thrashed. The baton clattered free. Evan tightened, not because he chose to, but because his flexor muscles fired maximally under sympathetic overdrive. The compression was brief, brutal, and indiscriminate. Blood flow through the carotid equivalents dropped sharply. Neural oxygenation followed. They stumbled. Momentum carried them into a fall. Grell's armored mass hit first. Evan released as they went down, but the damage had already cascaded. Hypoxic loss of consciousness preceded impact. Secondary cranial trauma completed the chain. In the moment, there was only the sound of armor on floor and Evan's breath tearing in and out of his chest. Grell Tharsk did not rise.
Silence consumed the concourse. Not the absence of sound. Alarms chimed softly, environmental systems adjusted airflow, distant footfalls echoed, but a social silence. No one spoke. No one moved closer. No one looked away. Evan knelt where he had fallen, hands resting uselessly on his thighs. His body had not yet caught up with reality. Muscles still trembled with residual adrenaline. His hearing rang high and thin. Around him, students recalibrated their understanding of safety.
Several species instinctively withdrew, not in fear, but reassessment. Others leaned forward, recording devices already active. A few stared at Grell's unmoving form with expressions that had no human equivalent, something between disbelief and professional curiosity. Supervisor Wren arrived at a controlled sprint. She did not shout. She scanned Grell's vitals once, then twice. Dead. Her jaw tightened. She signaled lockdown. Transparent security fields shimmered into place. Drones descended, forming a perimeter that excluded Evan without threatening him. That distinction did not go unnoticed. Wren knelt beside Evan. "Stay where you are," she said calmly. "Medical is en route." Evan nodded. His hands shook harder when he tried to still them. Across the concourse, junior officers avoided looking at the body. One of them looked at Evan instead, and looked away.
Evan spent 2 days in observation. Not because he was unstable, because the Academy did not yet understand how to classify him. Medical staff ran full-spectrum diagnostics. Musculoskeletal imaging revealed microfractures along the ulna and radius, stress tears in shoulder connective tissue, and widespread inflammation consistent with acute sympathetic overdrive. Neural scans showed elevated amygdala activity long after the incident. Dr. Holt reviewed the data personally. "This is what restraint looks like," she said quietly. Evan was released only after signing waivers acknowledging that human delayed onset injuries could manifest days later. He attended class anyway. Humans did that.
The chamber was ancient, its geometry optimized for voices rather than sightlines. Sound carried cleanly here. Lies did not. Observers filled the tiers in careful clusters, species segregating by comfort rather than rule. Legal counsel occupied the inner ring. Security supervisors stood at the periphery, silent and tense. Evan stood alone at the center. The charge was excessive force resulting in death. The unspoken question was whether restraint could be demanded from a species whose biology had evolved to ignore it under threat. Proceedings opened with procedural formalities, then moved quickly into reconstruction. Holograms replayed the incident from multiple angles. Motion slowed. Overlays marked stress spikes, force vectors, reaction delays. The room watched Evans step inside the swing again and again. An arbitrator asked whether the hold was trained. Evan answered honestly. "No," he said. "It was what my body did when I thought the next hit would put me down." Murmurs rippled. Dr. Maris Holt structured her testimony as a lecture because that was the only format capable of containing what she needed to explain. She began by dimming the chamber lights. "What you witnessed was not an anomaly," she said. "It was a predictable outcome of human neurobiology placed under improper authority stress." A hologram expanded above the chamber, a layered model of the human nervous system, color-coded by activation priority. Humans evolved on a world with persistent predation pressure, large fauna, close-range violence, environmental hazards that did not allow hesitation. She highlighted the limbic system. When threat perception crosses threshold, humans do not decide to fight harder. Decision-making authority is stripped from the cortex and delegated downward. The amygdala flared bright. Pain gating activates. Inhibitory motor neurons disengage. Force output increases by disabling restraint rather than adding strength. A student asked whether this meant humans routinely exceed safe biomechanical limits. Yes, Holt replied, and they pay for it afterward. She shifted to musculoskeletal imaging. Human muscles are anchored by connective tissue optimized for elastic recoil, not durability. Under adrenaline saturation, micro-tearing is expected, fractures are common, survival takes precedence over longevity. She brought up Evan Calder's anonymized medical data. The student demonstrated textbook sympathetic overdrive. Grip force exceeded baseline estimates by over 100%. This is not training. This is physiology. Another student raised a limb, mandibles clicking nervously. Could restraint have been maintained? Holt paused longer this time. Only if restraint is reciprocated, she said. Human systems assume escalation will end quickly. When authority ignores withdrawal signals, the human nervous system resolves ambiguity decisively. She displayed comparative overlays. Brachyry dominance reflexes, Virex pain compliance loops, Talarian freeze responses. Most species evolved to submit. Humans evolved to endure. The room shifted. A legal observer asked whether humans should therefore be restricted. Holt's expression hardened. You do not restrict a species because your protocols fail them. You correct the protocols. She concluded with a final slide, a single line of text. Restraint is a social contract, not a biological guarantee. The chamber remained silent, not in fear, but in recalibration.
The Academy debated consequences behind closed doors. Security leadership argued containment. Legal counsel argued precedent. Financial officers argued donor perception. One fact disrupted every argument. The recordings showed a lawful command ignored, followed by escalation from a sanctioned officer. Accepting fault meant admitting systemic failure. They chose survival-aligned truth. Internal audits expanded. Arrest warrants followed. The Academy did not purge quietly.
The ruling was unanimous. Self-defense under institutional failure. All charges dismissed. Reparations were issued, not to Evan alone, but to human exchange programs across coalition space. Security doctrine was rewritten. Humans were no longer categorized as moderate-risk civilians. They were reclassified as high-capacity responders, requiring mutual restraint protocols.
Recovery was not linear. Evan's injuries healed on predictable timelines. Bone microfractures knitted, connective tissue regained elasticity, strength returned asymmetrically, favoring habitual movement patterns. Sleep was harder. He woke to phantom impacts, to the remembered weight of armor collapsing beneath him, to the certainty that something had gone irreversibly wrong. Counseling sessions were structured, technical, and unsentimental. They cataloged triggers, raised voices, sudden proximity, authority figures blocking exits. They build protocols, grounding exercises, delayed response habits, explicit consent boundaries. Dr. Holt checked in weekly. Humans heal best when they understand the mechanism, she told him. Evan believed her. He returned to the concourse once, not to confront it, to walk through it. His heart rate spiked. He breathed through it. He did not leave. That mattered. Evan stood at a lectern. Alien students listened. Humans are not fragile, he said. We are restrained. And the Academy believed him. Time reframed the incident. It became a case study, a lecture module, a footnote in revised security doctrine. Evan graduated. He stayed,
first as a teaching assistant for Dr. Holt, later as a lecturer in applied xenobiology and human constraint systems. His classes were crowded. He did not dramatize. He taught mechanics, physiology, cost. Humans are not fragile, he told them. We are restrained, and restraint only works when it's mutual.
The change did not arrive with announcements. There were no banners, no memorials, no dramatic statements from the Interstellar Academic Coalition proclaiming reform. Institutions rarely celebrated their own failures, even when correction followed. Instead, the change appeared in margins. Security training modules were updated quietly. A new subsection appeared under cross-species enforcement protocols, its language clinical and careful. Human subjects. Engagement requires dual consent escalation. Physical enforcement without supervisory authorization is prohibited. No explanation followed. None was needed. New cadets absorbed the rule without context. Veteran officers understood it instinctively. Those who did not were reassigned before misunderstanding could become another lesson. At the academy itself, behavior shifted almost imperceptibly. Security officers adjusted their spacing when humans passed, not out of fear, but calculation. They left clear egress paths. They spoke first. They waited for acknowledgement instead of compliance. Human students noticed. So did everyone else. In lecture halls, humans were no longer referenced as anomalies or emerging risks. They became case studies in applied restraint theory. Instructors cited Evan Calder's incident without naming him, referring instead to Incident-REG 7731 and the revised doctrine that followed. Across coalition space, copies of Dr. Holt's lecture circulated. Not the dramatic portions, the diagrams, the data, the calm explanation that restraint was not an inherent trait, but an agreement, one that failed catastrophically when assumed instead of honored. At Tathis, Evan rarely spoke about the incident. He did not refuse to answer questions. He simply answered them plainly, without embellishment. Students who expected anger found none. Those who expected pride were quietly corrected. Survival isn't victory. It's just what happens when the system fails and you're still standing afterward. Years passed. New species joined the academy. Old rivalries softened into academic disagreements. The concourse where the incident occurred was renovated, its floor replaced during routine maintenance. No plaque marked the spot. But sometimes, during peak transit hours, observers noticed something subtle. When security officers issued instructions, humans listened, and so did everyone else. When humans stopped walking, officers stopped too. The rhythm of movement adjusted around mutual recognition rather than dominance. That was the real legacy. Not fear, not reverence, understanding. The academy remained a sanctuary, not because violence never occurred within its walls, but because it finally understood what restraint truly required. And that lesson endured.